Okay, so all of this information is on the BACB RBT competency task list. So that's basically a list that's on their website that tells you all of the different procedures that you'll need to know for the exam, or what you need to know for your job, basically, as a behavior technician. This is just a link. So at the end, I do offer the students to be able to contact me and gain access to this PowerPoint. And then that is just a basic link that'll bring you to the task list. So the first thing that we talk about is measurement. We have continuous, discontinuous, data, and graphs. So continuous is the measurement type that we rely on the most in ABA, primarily because it is a better representation of what you're actually seeing during a session, because it is continuous, which means it's data that's being collected from start to end of your observation. Discontinuous can happen in a very small amount of time. Maybe it happens for 5 minutes of different intervals during a DTT session, but it doesn't capture the entire image, which is why we don't always want to rely on it. However, sometimes those are our only options. So we'll start with continuous. That's exactly what I just said, is why we use continuous. It's every single occurrence is graphed and collected. So we'll start with frequency. Frequency is basically the count. So numbers, I wrote it's easy as 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Jackson 5. That's exactly what's going on here. Every single time you observe that a behavior occurring during a session, you're just going to mark it and you're going to count either on your fingers. I have a little picture of those clickers here. Our next one is duration. So I'm going to pull up another link so that we can take some duration data. Before I do that, just a reminder that this is just how long a behavior occurs. So you're going to start the timer at the start of the behavior and stop it at the end. So start at the onset, stop at the offset. And the onset and offset of a behavior is typically defined by the clinician prior to data collection. So of course I didn't do that here, but I think you'll get the point. Our next measurement is latency. This is how long it takes for the client to engage in a behavior after the SD or the instruction is presented. So in the Buddy the Elf clip, the SD, so the environmental change that happens before the behavior, is that there was a presentation of a liter of Coke in Buddy the Elf's gut, right? So we've added a bunch of Coke into his stomach, and then the behavior was the epic burp, right? So the time between finishing the 2 liter and the start of the burp, that's the latency. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You'd start the timer after he finishes his Coke and end it right as he starts burping. Another example of latency measurement is, for example, if I'm trying to get my husband's attention, I'm going to yell Curtis, okay? So that would be the SD. I'm going to say Curtis's name. And then I'm going to start a timer from the time I finish the word Curtis, and I'm going to stop the timer at the moment that he makes eye contact with me, because I'm trying to get his attention, right? I did note that latency between me saying his name and the target eye contact behavior tends to increase if the Utah Jazz are playing. So does anybody have any questions about latency and what that is?
I know what latency is and I understand it, but do we track it very often?
I haven't seen it too much, to be honest. Where this becomes important, I think, is, for example, I do have kiddos where we'll say their name to get their attention, and they kind of have a natural latency where, like, in their programs, I'll write, say so-and-so's name, but wait 5 to 7 seconds before you mark it incorrect for eye contact. So that's because this client typically has a 5 to 7 second latency between the time that you'll say their name and the corresponding eye contact. So I think we use it a lot in that context where it's like, just wait before you prompt, before you mark an incorrect, just wait for this, for like that 5 to 10 second latency. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. Makes sense to me.
So our next one is
Yes,
IRT.
makes sense to me too.
Thanks, Shirley. The next measurement is IRT. This is inter-response time. So this is just the time between responses. So for example, a clinician might want to measure the time between aggressions. So let's say a kiddo starts treatment, he just started ABA, and the time between successive hair pulls is like 5 seconds. So he's pulling staff's hair every 5 seconds, okay? So the reason that this is important to track is because hopefully with different interventions, we'll start seeing that time between responses increase. So hopefully we're getting it from, every 5 seconds to 5 minutes to 20 minutes in between responses to 24 hours between responses to a week to a month, etc. Does that make sense? So inter-response time is really important when you're either trying to increase the time between responses, like maybe maladaptive behaviors, or even the time between accidents, or like voiding in our pants kind of thing. Or maybe we're trying to decrease the inter-response time. Maybe we need a behavior to occur more often, such as initiating conversations with peers, or spontaneously mandating to use the bathroom, or things like that. So it's just a way to measure if behaviors are getting farther apart or closer together. So that's basically it for continuous measurement. Discontinuous measurement, I won't go over too much, just because this requires a lot more training from the clinician that's trying to implement it. We also don't use it very often, but I will mention what they are. So we've got 3 that the task list mentions. It's partial interval recording, okay? So you have an interval, which is just like a set time, right? Of, let's say, 10 seconds, okay? If the behavior occurs at all, for example, let's do SIB, so smacking my head, okay? If I smack my head even just once during that 10-second interval, you're gonna mark it like with a plus sign, right? So you're gonna mark that it occurred. So even if it just happens for a split second, you mark that it occurred. Whole interval recording, on the other hand, that behavior has to be going on for the entire interval. So back to our 10-second interval, if I'm smacking my head for the full 10 seconds, you put the plus sign. If I'm only smacking my head for 9 seconds, you do not mark it. Does that make sense? If it's whole interval recording, the behavior has to occur the whole interval for it to be marked as occurring. Anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay, cool. And then our last one with that is momentary time sampling. This one's a lot easier. This one we mainly would give like teachers of a classroom to use as a recording device, because it's pretty easy. So you have an interval of maybe 5 minutes, and you told your kiddos to go, specifically your client, to go work on an assignment at the desk. Well, this teacher can't sit there and record data the entire time because she has other students. So we'll put her on a 5-minute interval. Every time that 5-minute timer goes off, all she does is look up at the client. If at that very moment the client is engaging in that behavior, she will mark that it occurred, or put a little plus sign. Even if that kid is engaging in that behavior during the whole 5-minute interval, but he stops at the very moment that she looks up or at the moment that the timer goes off, it will be marked as not occurring. Does that make sense? So momentary time sampling is only marked correct or that it occurred if the client is engaging in that behavior at the very moment that the timer goes off. So it makes it really easy for teachers or people that are in charge of like multiple kids. In this presentation, I did like a little table. There's a whole apple underneath the table, and there's an eaten apple or a partially eaten apple on top of the table. This representation tells us that partial interval, as represented as my bitten out of apple, partial interval recording overestimates, because it only has to happen for like a split second in the interval for it to get the plus sign. So it's overestimating. Even if it only happens for 1 second in the interval, according to the data, it could have been 10 seconds, it could have been 9 seconds, or it could have been 1. So anyway, overestimates. Whole interval, because the behavior has to occur the entire interval for it to be marked, it has to be engaged in for the full 10 seconds, it will underestimate, because we cannot mark it as occurring if it only lasted 9 seconds. And that is something that they will ask on the exam. Any questions about measurement?
So I understand all of this. So is it just because of the company that we particularly work for that we don't use discontinuous measurements, or is it just not a popular way to get data as an overall ABA type thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so at least in my degree, they kind of discourage discontinuous measurement because it doesn't capture the entire, it doesn't represent the entire picture.
Okay.
For example, with this whole interval recording, if I'm just looking at the data, and it was, let's say a behavior occurred 9 out of the 10 seconds, I can't mark it as occurring. So if I'm just looking at the data, it looks like that kid did not engage in that behavior for that entire interval.
Right.
Even though he totally might have for like 5 seconds or 6 seconds, right? So it's just, there are situations where you'd use it. Like I said, it's easier for like people that can't sit there and be clicking the button every time or recording duration data. But it just, we don't use it because it doesn't capture the whole picture.
Okay.
And we need that to be able to make super awesome clinical decisions.
Okay.
Okay, so our next section in the task list, is assessments. We're basically only going to talk about 2 because it's all the task list asks for, and that is preference assessments, which I know you guys are super bomb at, and then ABC data collection. So to start with preference assessments, even though I already know that you guys know this, just for the presentation in general, it is part of our job, and it is so important to find things that our kiddo or our client likes, which sounds so dumb and so easy, but it's so important. We are looking for items such as toys, sensory items, swings, etc., actions like tickles and spins, words, so praise in this case, activities like basketball and running and going to Swig to pick up a soda. So anything, we are trying to find anything that our client loves so that we can create, so that we can use these things to motivate them to work, right? So just like you wouldn't go to work if you weren't being paid, but we know that money is highly motivating and you love money, so we offer you money. First work, then you get money, right? That motivates you. That's basically what we're doing for these kiddos. We're finding their money. We're finding what motivates them and gets them to work. For the task, for the RBT exam, it'll ask you about a few different forms of preference assessments. The first one's super easy, and it's indirect. In ABA, whenever we talk about direct or indirect, it's basically observed or not observed. So indirect means I did not observe it. Direct means I saw it with my own eyes. So an indirect preference assessment just means that I didn't see the client wanting this item, but maybe I asked the client, or I asked a caregiver, or I asked another technician that's worked with this client before. Those are all indirect preference assessments, basically just an interview process to find out what they've worked for in the past. I think the one that we use the most at our clinic is a free operant observation preference assessment, which is my favorite. So you put them in an enriched environment like we have at our center, where there's just toys and candy and whatever everywhere. And you just kind of watch and see whatever that client runs to or spends the most time with. So for example, if a kiddo runs in the room, he sees the train tracks and he just runs over the train tracks and starts playing with them for 10 minutes. In my head, I know, okay, this is something that this kid loves, right? And I'm gonna take note of that. Free operant, it's awesome. Single stimulus. So a stimulus is just kind of an item or an environmental change, something in the client's environment is basically what a stimulus is. So single stimulus is like one thing. So I'm going to present one item or one action or one activity, and I'm just going to wait and see how they react to it. They might put it down right away, and in my head, I'm going to take note that, okay, they don't love that. They didn't love the train track because they really only played with it for like a minute. On the other hand, I might hand them a train and he might want to stay with that thing for like 10 minutes. And then I know, okay, this kid likes this thing. Now we can try working for it. So that's single stimulus. You're just going to give them a single thing. Paired stimulus, pairing mean two. You're going to give them two items to choose from. They can choose. And again, you're just going to wait and see if it's something that they'll engage with. Multiple stimulus is more than two. So 3 or plus things that you're going to offer them. And again, wait, observe, see if they like it, see if they don't. Just how do they engage with those things? Something important to note with a multiple stimulus is that if you're presenting all 3 at once, you might want to run preference assessments multiple times. So with multiple stimulus, I might put out 3 different pieces of candy, and they might choose the Skittle. Then maybe the next time, I take the Skittle away just to see what they would choose next. So maybe the next time they choose the M&M. So then in my head, I have a hierarchy. Okay, if I run out of Skittles this day, then I know I can go and they'll work for M&Ms as well. So you can remove items from the selection and add items as you go. Okay. Any questions before we move on? We have indirect, which is just an interview. Free operant, which is you just watch them and see what they like. Single stimulus, present one thing. Paired stimulus, present 2 things. Multiple stimulus, present more than 2 things. Do we got it? And then these are just kind of those, as you see in my PowerPoint, I've provided visual examples of what that would look like in real life. Okay, so ABA data collection. So, oh, sorry, not ABA, ABC data collection. So first of all, what is ABC? Does anybody know what the A stands for in ABC?
Antecedent.
Antecedent.
Thank you. What about our B?
Behavior.
And C?
Consequence.
Beautiful. So an antecedent is a stimulus, a thing, an environmental change or an event, so something happens in the kiddo's environment before the occurrence of the behavior. So in ABA, this is often an instruction would be an antecedent. Maybe it's a choice that we present. Maybe an antecedent is just your presence. Maybe you walk in and it makes them want to engage in a behavior. Hopefully that behavior is running up to you and loving you. Sometimes it's screaming and running the other way. It depends. But an antecedent is really just any change into that kiddo's environment that happens before a behavior. So we have our behavior, which is just what the client does, and then our consequence, which again is another stimulus. So this is an event or an environmental change that comes after the behavior. So antecedent is a stimulus that comes before, and consequence is a stimulus that comes after. Okay, so for your job in regards to ABC data collection, if you are asked to collect this kind of data or complete this form of assessment, you're just going to observe. Sit back and observe, and you're just going to be writing down the events. What is happening in the session? What are you seeing? What environmental changes are occurring? So I wrote a very basic example here. Our antecedent is mom says, no, you can't have cake before dinner. So a refusal is our antecedent, okay? The behavior, the kiddo drops to the floor and starts screaming till his face turns blue. So that's his response or his behavior. What happens after he's turning blue is his mom says, okay, fine, you can have cake before dinner. That was the consequence, right? So you, as the observer, you are just writing this down. Mom said no to cake. And then the kid started screaming till he turned blue. And then all of a sudden the mom gave him cake. That's literally all you're doing in an ABC assessment. Cool? It's basically just writing a story of what you see happening right in front of your face. Okay, our next section is on skill acquisition and behavior reduction. This is my favorite because this is actually the job. So everything we've talked about till now, a lot of it we don't really see every day, right? We're not seeing multiple stimulus assessment or preference assessments. We're not being asked to take ABC data every day. We're rarely taking discontinuous measurement, things like that. So I really love this section on skill acquisition. This is where we're seeing behavior change. And this is why our kiddos come to us. And this is why we come to work every day, because it's really cool and really magical to see these interventions work out. And you get to play them, you get to implement them. You are fully hands-on. So, what you guys are all tired of hearing, we're going to talk about DTT. We hear DTT all the time. Now we're going to talk about what that means. Does anybody know what DTT stands for?
Discrete trial training.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so does DTT only happen at a table?
No.
Okay, that's so important. Thank you so much. Yes, first off, as written in my beautiful presentation, DTT does not equal table work. A lot of times table work is included in our DTT programs, but they are not synonymous, okay? So I can be working on DTT trials anywhere, on the floor, at a table, outside, at a park, at the house. This is where trials, they're decided by staff, they're initiated by staff, and the reinforcers are typically pre-selected, okay? And we'll talk about why those three things are important in comparing to NET or natural environment teaching later. Okay, bonus question. Can anybody tell me the steps, the 5 steps to discrete trial training?
Is this the instructional cycle? Because I totally did a mentor session today on it.
Yes.
Okay, so first it's the SD, And then the next would be prompt if needed. The next one would be the response. The next one is the consequence. And the next one is inner trial. Whatchamacallit.
Yeah.
Time.
Nice. Can you quickly tell me what intertrial time is?
Oh, sheesh. I told the guy that it was the time for them to enjoy their reinforcement and let them process what happened before you do the next trial.
Yeah, for sure. What should you, this is for anybody, what should you as the technician be doing during ITT or intertrial time?
Get ready for your next trial that you're gonna run.
Yeah, so maybe you're pulling out different materials. Maybe you're creating your field of items. This is also a great time to just click those buttons in your iPad to collect that data. Perfect, beautiful, awesome. So our SD is our antecedent. If we need to, we can prompt, because we love when our kids succeed, even if it's with our help. They will succeed, which is their behavior. We will see them engage in that behavior, whether it's with our help or without. We will reinforce no matter what, unless, it's incorrect. But they won't be, because we've just prompted them. And then we let them enjoy their prize. We are collecting data. We're getting ready for the next set of trials. Cool. Another important thing about DTT is that it happens quickly, okay? So the next couple of slides are just some really quick DTT targets, like touch green, touch red, touch book. Where's the nose? And they touch the nose, okay? It can happen that quick. Most of the time it probably doesn't. But you don't have to give a Skittle for all 4 of those. I could go through all 4 of those trials and then give a Skittle and they can enjoy their time. But it is important to note that DTT is fast. That's one of the defining characteristics of discrete trial training. Does anybody have any questions about that before we move on to natural environment teaching? Cool. Okay, so NET, natural environment teaching. Now this is very different from DTT in the sense that, well, one, it can occur at a table, it can occur anywhere, and it is primarily initiated by the client. So your client is leading this session, okay, leading this section of the day. That being said, you're not just following them around and letting them do whatever they want. Your job is to contrive and capture. So those are 2 really important words in natural environment teaching: contrive and capture. So to begin, so capturing involves just as you're following your client around the environment, they're going to have to engage in various behaviors, right? Whether it's wanting to gain access to a toy that appears playing with, whether somebody says hi to them, maybe they need to get access to a toy that's up high and they need your help to get it. There's just lots of behaviors that are naturally going to occur, and you're going to capture it just like you would like a camera or a photo. You're going to capture those moments. So when you see that a kiddo, as he's going around the environment, needs something, for example, those are the moments you're going to prompt them through it. Maybe they need to get your attention. That's very natural. So maybe you'll just tap your shoulder and they'll know, oh, I got to tap their shoulder. So you'll prompt them through it as needed because they're learning, and you're going to collect data. So you're collecting data and prompting things that you are seeing in their natural environment, that they are naturally occurring, contingencies that are just popping up around them, just like it does to us, okay? So that one's pretty easy because it's all on the kiddo. Contriving is where it gets a little more tricky and you have to be a bit more creative, So maybe these occurrences that are written in the program, in the individual client's program, isn't just coming up in the play area at the clinic, okay? So maybe you have to make those changes, those very natural changes to the environment where we are then evoking those responses. So for example, when I'm contriving manding targets, maybe we're coloring with markers. We're just chilling at the table and we are coloring with markers because NET can happen at the table. I'm probably going to hold or hoard all of the markers. I'm going to keep them all to myself on purpose because I'm contriving, and I'm going to wait. I might even turn away from the client and look the opposite direction. In this instance, I'm going to prompt them through getting my attention, and then I'm going to hold the markers and I'm going to wait for them to ask for the marker. Maybe I even make them ask for a specific color. Things like that. So it's very natural because we're just coloring. They are initiating. I can see that they're reaching for the markers that I have, but we're going to prompt them through the appropriate methods of gaining access to those markers. So capturing is you are prompting and collecting data as it arrives in this kiddo's world. Contriving is you are creating those opportunities to prompt and collect data in the natural environment. Any questions on that? That was a lot of me talking. Okay. NET, capture and contrive. And it is client initiated. Okay. Our next procedure is called chaining. So this is teaching bigger skills in steps and then linking them together like a chain, okay? So when we teach this, we often go with hand washing because it's really easy and it's something we all have to learn how to do. So we're gonna start off with forward chaining. We have forward chaining, backward chaining, and total task chaining. Those are the ones you're gonna need to know for the exam. Forward chaining. So you have a set of steps to complete. This looks like the client engages in the very first step independently, and then you are going to prompt the rest. So typically that's hand over hand because these kids are still learning. So client engages in the first step, you prompt the rest. Once they master step 1, now the client will engage in step 1 and step 2. You will prompt the rest. They master those. The client engages step 1, step 2, step 3, and you prompt the rest. So hand washing, the client will turn on the water. You'll prompt the rest. Then the client will turn on the water and get his hands wet. You will prompt the rest. Then client turns on the water, gets his hand wet, then gets soap. You will prompt the rest, etc. Cool? So forward chaining, you teach the very first step and you just go step by step by step in order. Okay? Backward chaining, it's the opposite. This one kind of took me a while to learn because I didn't really understand why we would go opposite, but there's a lot of research behind it that shows it's super effective. And I think it's the one that we like to implement the most when we're teaching little kids chains, behavior chains. It's the one I see the most. Anyway, so backward chaining. I am going to prompt, or you the technician, you are going to prompt all of the steps except for the very last step. Okay? They master the last step. You are going to prompt all of the steps except for the last 2 steps. They master those. Then you are going to prompt all of the steps except the last 3 steps, etc. Hand washing, this looks like You are prompting everything in the hand washing process except throw the paper towel away. They will do that, okay? You then will prompt all of the steps except wiping your hands with the paper towel and then throwing it away. So the client will then wipe his hands with the paper towel and throw it away by himself, okay? Then you will prompt all of the steps except getting a paper towel, wiping his hands, throwing it away, etc. Cool? So that in backward training, we work backwards. Super straightforward. Questions? Cool. Our last chaining process, this one's really simple. It's called total task chaining. This is basically where you have a chain or a series of steps. But you basically will run the entire trial with them. You will walk through all of the steps in the chain with them, prompting as and where needed from the start to the end. So you're just going to go and have them wash their hands, and where they need assistance, you will be there to provide it. From beginning to end, from turning on the water to throwing the paper towel away. Okay. Any questions on chaining? Forward chaining, backward chaining, total task chaining. Coolio. Shaping is our next procedure. So this is where, this is what I think is coolest for me, because I just recently got done using this procedure to train a rat for an experimental analysis of behavior project. And it was really cool to watch these rats and watch this shaping process actually work. So this is where you're reinforcing closer and closer approximations of a response until you reach the desired behavior. So in this example, I used cutting scissors. So maybe when they very first start ABA, they don't even know which holes their fingers go in. So our very first step has to be teaching the client which fingers go in which holes in the scissors, okay? And my end goal in mind is they can cut out a picture of on a piece of paper, right? So that's my end goal. But right now, I gotta teach them about these finger holes, okay? After they master the finger holes, my next step in a shaping process would be, with that grip, can they open and close the scissors? Because that's hard, to be honest. That's some serious fine motor movement, right? So now they can open and close with that grip, but can they open and close it on a piece of paper? So that would be my next step, is introducing the actual paper to cut. Okay, now I'm gonna draw a line on the paper. Can they open and close the scissors on a straight designated line? That's a straight line. My next step might be a curved line. And then my last step would be a picture. They will finally be able to cut out a picture. Okay, so here it is. We're gonna reinforce just closer and closer approximations, or maybe steps, until we can finally start reinforcing the desired behavior, which is to cut a picture out in this case. Okay, this one's my favorite. So like with my rat, he had to learn how to pull a lever. You hear about this all the time with Skinner's operant boxes or chambers. He had to learn how to pull a lever in order to get reinforcement or a treat, okay? But before that, lever meant nothing, so he wouldn't approach it. So I started off with, I would give him a reinforcer, a reinforcer every single time he looked at the lever. So even if his head was just like in the direction of the lever, I would give him reinforcement. Then it was every time he like got close enough to touch his nose to the lever. So maybe he's like smelling it or something, but he's touching his nose to the lever. I would give reinforcement. Then I would start reinforcing when the rat would touch it with his paw. And then eventually he would push down on it. And I would start obviously reinforcing that, because that's my desired behavior. That's what we were training. Any questions on shaping? Coolio. Okay. Also, just so you know, if you guys need to go, feel free to hang up. I will not be upset at all. I totally get it. But anyway, discrimination training. So this is to discriminate, discrimination training. So think of the word discriminate, okay? So you're gonna reinforce a behavior in one environment and not in others. So can this child discriminate where and when it's appropriate to engage in that behavior? For example, it is appropriate to go pee in the bathroom, okay? It is not appropriate to go pee in the bedroom. It's appropriate to talk and play and initiate peer interaction outside at recess. It is not okay to talk and initiate playtime in the classroom, right? So we're going to teach them how to discriminate when and where to engage in these behaviors. Did I hear somebody? My favorite example, and if you're looking at the PowerPoint, this is what you'll see, is I use the Krispy Kreme donut hot now sign as an example. So for example, when the hot now sign is off and the neon lights are all turned off, if I were to go into Krispy Kreme donuts at that time and ask for a free donut, I would not get a free donut, okay? So in discrimination training, you are reinforcing a behavior in one instance or in one environment and not in another. So in this case, I'm not going to get reinforcement if I go ask for a free donut and the light is off. However, if I go ask for a free donut when the light is on, I'm going to get a free donut. So discrimination training, I've got two different antecedents, and a Krispy Kreme sign that is off and a Krispy Kreme sign that is on. If it's on and I engage in my manding behavior for my free donut, I will get a free donut. I will be reinforced. If I go and the light is off and I engage in my behavior of asking for a free donut, I will not get reinforcement. Does that make sense? So my kiddo will be reinforced if he's playing with peers outside. He will not be reinforced if he's playing with peers during a lesson time or in a classroom. Okay. A stimulus control transfer. So when I was taking the RBT exam, this is where I got the most confused. I didn't really know how to implement it or really what it meant. I had heard of things like instructional control. I had heard of stimulus, but I had no idea what was going on for real. But this is basically a behavior that occurs in one environment will now start to be reinforced in other environments, okay? So my first thought is like home sessions. Maybe a kid starts in our clinic, and they are able to comply to instructions right away when it is you, the technician, at the center. This kid is awesome. He is compliant. He is following directions left and right. But then you go home and mom is complaining he doesn't listen, he's throwing all these tantrums, etc., right? So we need to transfer that stimulus control over to mom or the parent and the home setting. Okay? So, for example, he's getting lots of reinforcement for complying with us at the center. So now we're training mom. We're going to train mom about follow through, about reinforcement, and that is all going to take place in the home. So that soon, the home and mom will evoke those same compliant, awesome rock star behaviors. Now it's kind of a difficult example, so I provided a lot easier example of manding. Maybe you didn't know that this was stimulus control transfer. I didn't know. But we use this a lot with manding. So we have a kid come in and he can't he's working on like sounds, echoics, he's not quite at independent manding, he might start off where the behavior is under control of an echoic prompt. This means if he's reaching for my gummy bears, I'm gonna say bear. He'll say bear, and then I will give him his gummy bear, okay? But the word say bear, or like the word bear, the mand for bear, is under control of my prompt, okay? So it's under stimulus control of my echoic prompt. So now, in order to complete a stimulus control transfer, we are going to go from an echoic prompt to just the motivation or the desire to gain access to this gummy bear. So it will start from an echoic prompt, but then hopefully with stimulus control transfer, we can make it so that the kiddo is asking for bear just at the presence of a bear or a gummy bear, right? So there's a lot of prompt fading, which we're going to talk about briefly in stimulus control transfer. So with that manding, we'll go from an echoic prompt to maybe asking, what do you want? To those motivations, or just maybe he just wants a gummy bear and he's able to independently mand for a gummy bear, which is obviously what we want in the end. Before we move on to prompting, does anybody have any questions about stimulus control transfer? That's what I was confused about the most. Okay, well, we'll move on. So prompting, I know you guys all know this because we see it every day, but there is a hierarchy of intrusiveness and independence when talking about prompts. So independent, can they do it by themselves? Gestural or nonverbal prompts, so maybe I'm asking which one's green, but I'm holding the green card a lot closer to you so that you're going to click or pick the green card. A verbal prompt, maybe I'm like saying their name to get their attention, but I have to say, look at my eyes. That would be a verbal prompt, right? Model, maybe you're trying to train a kid to raise their hand to get attention. So maybe I'll sit right next to the kid and I'll go like this. I'll raise my hand and I'll model it for him, right? It's also considered a nonverbal prompt in our center, but for now we're going to use model. And then we have partial and full physical prompts. So just kind of depending on the level of physical assistance that they need. A full physical prompt is basically you are doing it, you are doing the task, but their hands are in your hands while you're completing the task. They need 100% your help. And that is the most intrusive. So it's just some general rules about prompting. Unless told otherwise by the clinician, and sometimes the clinician will do different things than what you're studying for the RBT exam based off of the literature. But for now, these are just general rules that are really important. So first of all, always start with least intrusive. And what I mean is it's not always just try to let them do it independently, because we do believe in errorless teaching. So we love it when they are getting that reinforcement. So maybe least intrusive for some clients is a verbal prompt. Maybe least intrusive for some clients is that gestural prompt, or like the non-verbal prompts where we're moving the cards so that they are picking the correct answers. So least intrusive is different for every kid. Sometimes it is independent, and that's awesome. Anyway, so at the least intrusive level, you're going to give them about 2 or 3 opportunities before you before you have to move up in intrusiveness for prompting. So I'm going to let the client try it about 2 to 3 times with a nonverbal prompt, for example, before I provide a verbal prompt or a physical prompt. Once you've moved up in intrusiveness though, let's say you've moved up all the way to a full physical prompt and you're prompting it every single time, you're physically guiding him to the right answer. 2 to 3 times. Give him 2 to 3 times of correct responding with your prompt, and then try backing down again. So again, maybe we're at our full physical prompt. We're hand over hand prompting this response 2 to 3 times. He's getting it, obviously. Maybe this time I'm going to give a partial physical prompt where maybe I just kind of nudge him in the right direction. And maybe he's getting it 2 or 3 times. Again, 2 to 3 times of correct responses. I'm going to move down again to a maybe a non-verbal prompt. I'm going to give him about 2 to 3 times with that one, and then we're going to shoot for the independent one. Okay? So our key numbers is about 2 to 3 times before you're moving up or down in intrusiveness of prompting. Something that is also really important, but we do have to be careful of, is something called graduated guidance. And this is prompting, but basically you are always there right next to the client, and you move in and out of intrusiveness as needed to complete a task. So maybe they're cutting, but maybe they only need your help sometimes, or maybe just to open the scissors again. So you are there and you are ready to step in when they need it, but step back as soon as they don't need it. So it's guided guidance. You are in and out as needed. The only thing we have to be aware of with this specific prompting procedure is prompt dependence. Even though they might need us or want that prompt, we need to be careful that we're not coming in and helping or prompting too soon or too much, so they don't become dependent on our hand and our help. Okay, questions on prompting? I think you guys are all really awesome at it. So, cool, cool, cool. Token systems. For my presentation, I'm relating this a lot to money because it's the token economy we come in contact with every single day, okay? For example, when we work, when we come and we come to the clinic, go into homes, and we're getting beaten up and we're implementing all these procedures, we are working, and we are doing so that we can earn tokens. Our tokens happen to be monies, and it's awesome, and we love monies, but token systems are when the client earns small tokens that add up and can be exchanged for desired or bigger item or activity. So for us, I go to work, I get my tokens or my money, and I'm going to exchange it for things like my rent, my car payments, gas, vacations, food, heck a ton of food and swig. So I'm exchanging these tokens for my preferred items. And then here in my presentation, if you're watching, it is a picture of a typical token economy or a token system that you would see in a clinic where you've got some boxes and some stars, and there's 5 stars here. So for every awesome behavior or task that they complete, they get a star. And it looks like in this example that they're going to exchange it for some computer time. Okay, we use a lot of token systems. Do any of you guys have any questions about those? Okay, cool. We are almost done, so I'm so sorry. And these ones will be quick. Antecedent strategies. So antecedent, if we remember from the ABC data collection, is environmental changes that occur before a behavior. So these are procedures that you can, or strategies as it says, that you can implement prior to asking a client to complete a difficult task. Here I write low probability. In ABA we use low probability and high probability as ways to describe behaviors that will basically, like, more, if it's lower probability, it's more difficult, or it's less preferred. If it's a higher probability task, maybe it's more preferred or it's a lot easier, the chances of them engaging in that behavior is a lot higher, right? So before I ask my client to do something that's super hard that I know maybe in the past has triggered some problem behaviors like aggression or non-compliance, I can use these antecedent strategies. Remember, antecedent means before the behavior. I just picked my top 3 favorites because I think these are the ones that we use the most, specifically at UTBS. Number 1 is the PREMAC principle, or the grandma principle, or the grandma rule. PREMAC principle. It is my all-time favorite. I think I used it like 30 minutes in a 2-hour, I think I used it like 30 times in like a 2-hour observation that I did just today. First this, then that. So you're just creating a quick contingent. You are putting preferred activities contingent on that non-preferred task you're about to ask them to do. So let's say you know that they want to play Roblox or video games. How I would present that or use the PREMAC principle is I would say, okay, first we're going to have 5 conversations with peers. Then you can have Roblox, okay? So first the non-preferred task or the low probability task, followed by the high probability task or the preferred activity or item that they want, right? This could look like first do your chores, then you can go outside. First eat your veggies, then you can have dessert, okay? Really easy, super simple. A lot of people do try to add words to this, like, I don't know, try to make it more complicated. But when I'm coaching or doing oversight, I literally tell them, say this, first this, then this. Keep it so simple. And they will know exactly what they need to do in order to gain access to those preferred items. PREMAC principle is dope, guys. Use it. Okay, my next antecedent strategy is high probability sequence. I think sometimes we talk about it as behavior momentum. They aren't exactly the same, but I think people tend to exchange those, try to use those terms synonymously? Wait. Yeah, synonymously. Okay, so a high probability sequence. If I know that transitioning from playing with trains to sitting in a chair is going to be really hard for my client, I'm going to provide him with a series of super easy tasks to complete so I can give him lots and lots of reinforcement, build up that momentum. Again, that's why we kind of refer to it as behavior momentum, so that I can finally present that awful low probability task demand of go sit in a chair. For example, let's say we're sitting on the floor, he wants to play with trains and I need him to go sit in a chair. I might say, okay, touch head. Nice job, here's a Skittle. Okay, clap hands. And he claps his hands and I give him a Skittle. And then I might say, stand up, and he stands up and I give him a Skittle, some tickles, right? And I might give him like 3 to 5 of these really easy tasks. Each one has to be reinforced with praise, edibles, whatever. And then I'm gonna give it to him. Okay, time to go sit down. And because you've built up that momentum of providing reinforcement and getting this kid excited and happy, the chances of him complying have just increased exponentially. Okay, so if you know that there are certain task demands or instructions that are going to trigger your client, feel free to give them 5 to 7 really easy things to do that you know he will probably engage in, so that you can give him lots of reinforcement, so that when you give him that hard one, it'll be a lot easier for him to comply. So high probability sequence. It's a sequence of really easy tasks before the one really hard one. Last antecedent strategy is choices. This one we see a ton. So this looks like, hi Jordan. So this looks like before, if you know that there's going to be a task demand or an instruction that's going to be triggering for your client, feel free to kind of manipulate it and give them choices to make them feel like they have control over the situation. Even though you do, it's a secret. You are in full control. So this could look like, do you want to have 3 bites of broccoli or do you want 6 bites of broccoli? They'll probably pick 3 bites of broccoli, but that's probably what you wanted to begin with, so you win. You win in this case, even though they got to make the choice. Another one is, do you want to go to lesson in 1 minute? Like, do you want to transition? Do you want to go to lesson in 1 minute or 4 minutes? They will probably pick 4 minutes. But hey, you were already okay with 4 minutes, so that's totally fine that they pick the big number, right? Another one would just be, okay, we're here, we're in lesson, you don't like this. Do you want to sit in the red chair or the blue chair, right? So we just kind of give them some light choices. Everything's still in your control, but it makes them feel like they've got some power, which helps with compliance as well. Okay, we've talked about pre-MAC principle, high probability sequence, and choices. Any questions before we move on? Cool. Differential reinforcement. This is basically where you're going to reinforce one behavior while simultaneously putting another, I've got tweezers. Sorry, this is weird. You're going to place one behavior, you're going to reinforce one behavior while simultaneously placing another behavior on extinction. And we'll talk about extinction in just a second. And I think that'll be the last thing we talk about today. So we've got a DRO and a DRA. There's a DRL and a DRH that we'll talk about, but the DRO and DRA is what we use the most. So DRO is differential reinforcement of other behavior. I've heard it also said as of omission of behavior. So this is basically when you're going to provide reinforcement to the client when he or she is engaging in really any behavior that is not the target behavior. So in regards to like SIB or self-injurious behavior, I'm going to reinforce whenever that kiddo has a calm, safe body. If his hands are down and away from smacking his head, I am going to reinforce that. I'm going to give him lots of praise and maybe some edibles, right? I'm also simultaneously going to withhold reinforcement when he is engaging in unsafe behavior. I will not be reinforcing his hitting his head behaviors, right? So that's just when he's not engaging in SIB, provide reinforcement. DRA is a little bit more specific. This is differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. So for example, a lot of kids, when they want like a treat or a toy or something, their natural instinct is just run up and grab it because they want it. So they're going to go try to get it. So we're going to ignore that. We're going to place that on extinction. And we are going to make sure that he doesn't get access to those items that he's grabbing for. And instead, we're going to reinforce manding and appropriate manding for that item or for access to that item. So again, with differential reinforcement, we are reinforcing the behavior we want to see, in this case, mands or asking for access. And we are going to withhold reinforcement for the inappropriate behavior of just like grabbing whatever they want. A DRL, just really fast, is just when you're going to give reinforcement to the client when the client engages in a rate of behavior that's below a specified level. So low rates of behavior, reinforce. Okay? We use these a lot for like aggression and stuff. We want those rates of behavior to decrease. A DRH is differential reinforcement of high rates of behavior. So now this is a behavior we need to increase. So I'm going to give reinforcement to this client whenever the rate of behavior is above a specified level, at or above that level. And those levels will be set by the clinician. Okay, one more time, differential reinforcement. You are reinforcing one behavior and putting the inappropriate behavior on extinction. Cool. Questions before we move on to our very last thing that we're going to talk about today. Cool. So extinction, we already briefly talked about this with differential reinforcement. We are going to withhold or block the reinforcer that typically follows that target behavior. So let's say they are cussing and threatening to punch you and threatening to push you and making all these threats of aggression to get your attention. If this is a behavior we're going to place on extinction, we are going to ignore, ignore, ignore. If attention is the reinforcer, we are going to withhold. We will not be giving attention to those behaviors, okay? Access, meaning if our client's tantruming, screaming, flopping on the floor in the grocery store because mom won't give them the candy bar, we will make sure they do not get that candy bar, okay? Because if we give them the candy bar after they're screaming and tantruming in the grocery store, we have now just made it so that we are increasing the tantrum, screams, and flopping on the floor in the grocery store in the future. That is not what we want. That is definitely not what parents want, for sure. So do not give them access. Last one, escape. So if a client is screaming and swiping all the supplies off the table onto the floor just to get away from a task, do not let them get away from that task, okay? You will keep them there until they can comply. Once they have followed instructions, you are more than welcome to let them go and be free and gain lots of reinforcers, but not until they are complying. That's the whole follow-through process. Okay, so extinction, we are withholding or blocking a reinforcer following a problem behavior or a maladaptive behavior. Quick general rules about extinction. When you are using extinction procedures, we are not punishing them. So we're not yelling at them. We're not using our mom voices, even though it might be hard. We are checking our RBF. We're making sure that our face is neutral, our tone is neutral. Because again, we don't want to ruin our relationship with them. These are not punishment procedures. We're not trying to scare them into complying. So we will remain neutral and calm. Lastly, whenever something is put on extinction, whenever we are using extinction, we will always find something to reinforce. Always. So if I'm ignoring a specific behavior, such as cursing, as soon as he's able or the client is able to get my attention or say my name or ask for attention, I'm going to give him all of the attention. I'm going to reinforce that awesome behavior like crazy. So we are never allowed to use extinction unless we are reinforcing an awesome behavior that we want to see increased. Okay, that was everything from the task list, and I know that that was super long, and I know I had some technical difficulties at the beginning, so I'm so grateful for you guys sticking with me. Do you guys have any questions? And if not, you have my phone number and my email, and I see you at work, so you're more than welcome to ask me. And if you are getting ready to take your RBT exam, you are more than welcome to ask me, and I will send you a copy of the PowerPoint as well, because there were some more examples for each of the procedures listed. Okay, thank you guys so much. I'm gonna stop the recording.